Hi, I'm Judith Dreyer. Thank you for joining me for this podcast series, The Holistic Nature of Us. I invite you to journey with me into a better understanding of the concepts behind our holistic nature and how that ties us directly to the natural world around us. My intention is to be your guide for this half hour as we begin seeing our world with fresh eyes, gaining more understanding and learning how we can connect the dots in practical ways that we are nature and nature's in us. I feature a broad range of guests deeply concerned about the environmental issues of our time and more. Authors and educators, practitioners and others whose passion for this earth and for all species help us create sustainable bridges of understanding. These folks are innovators, action-oriented, creating solutions in a variety of ways that honors us and the planet's holistic nature. I am honored to share their stories, their projects, and their passion with all of you. And today I'm delighted to introduce you to Massiel Abramsom. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist working with infants, young children, and their parents, providing attachment and trauma-based therapy. She's worked in the clinical mental field for over 9 years in different capacities: management, training, and direct care. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in human development with a specialty in marriage and family therapy from the University of Rhode Island. And today, I'd like to welcome Massiel. I invited her here to talk about the world of family therapy, specifically working with children and infants, and hopefully look at the holistic model in terms of what's happening in that world and how it's affecting them and their treatment and their healing. So welcome, Massiel.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Judith. Happy to be here.
Great. So what I'd like you to do is to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this field.
Great. So, again, thank you. I got into the field, I always knew from an early age that I had a special interest in people, special interest in children, especially when it came to how people communicate with each other, and even when people have difficulties in communications, whether it's because of emotional issues, or even just language or physical difficulties that interfere with communication. So I, got my degree in psychology, and when I was looking to see what to do further in that area of human beings, I found marriage and family therapy. And marriage and family therapy is a unique kind of therapy in that it's not just about the individual mental health, but it's understanding that nobody works in isolation and the whole is greater than its parts. So understanding that for a person to really find healing, you need to bring the family in. You need to bring their relationships in. So that's the field that I went into, and it was very much related to the dynamics that interplay in families, and in families when they're going through different life circumstances. So a new parent, a divorced family, families going through marital conflicts, empty nest type situations. And over the years, I've worked with different populations, but I've kind of narrowed things down as of late to working with infants and young children. So I've learned so much about humans now that I've been working with the youngest people. So there's so much to learn about babies, and they don't work in isolation. Humans, as a baby, there's actually a saying in early childhood, which is, there's no such thing as a baby. There's only a baby and another person. So babies exist only in relationships because they can't take care of themselves. So it was a perfect combination of my work in understanding people's systems, like how people interact with each other, especially when it comes to a baby that relies so much on their caregiver. That's how I ended up here.
That's really interesting, because what I'm hearing in your story is that there is a holistic concept involved, which means that we're only as strong as our weakest link. And we forget that in our family dynamics. We think we can just go off and take care of everything on our own, but who are we outside of the family? Who are we inside the family? And nature works in community. We know we have very complex ecosystems out there that help and support each other, and the same thing is true for us. One of the focuses I'd like to talk about is children. They're invaluable to us. They're the future generation. What do you see happening in general in your line of work?
So, like I said, in working in this field with different ages and different populations, what's really different now and what's new is infant mental health and early childhood mental health. So you can look at a baby and understand that there is development in their emotions, in their communication, in their physical needs. It's easier to see probably physical changes that babies go through, right? First they hold their head up, then they roll over, crawl, walk. You see the evolution of that. Now we're starting to observe more the evolution of their emotional world as well. So, for example, a 2-month-old baby can follow people with their eyes and even kind of turn their head and follow somebody across the room, while a 6-month-old baby sees somebody kind of walking across the room and they might show some stranger anxiety, some weariness of who they're looking at. So it goes from just the act of observing and kind of making eye contact with someone to actually having a feeling about it and having a response to it. So there's so much power in this knowledge about the human growth, not only of physical milestones that babies go through, but the emotional milestones. And with that power of knowledge that we give the caregivers and oftentimes the mothers, you can start to understand that there is a personhood already in a baby that's really days old, and that builds a strong attachment because the mother, for example, or the caregiver is able to understand that the baby is experiencing something, put themselves in that perspective to help the baby overcome anything that they go through, because babies actually go through a lot. And a lot of times people ask me, well, what kinds of things could an infant need or a young mother? And what, infant mental health focus really promotes is strong attachments. It decreases chances for maternal depression, decreases the chances of the child developing some further mental health disorder when they're a little bit older and it's a little harder to address it, and a great increase in communication. And communication is so invaluable that being able to create that in your first relationships in the very early days of your life is critical. So before, there's a time when people thought, okay, well, the baby's too little for that, too little for reading, or they can't see too far, so it doesn't matter so much what happened to him when, he was 2 years old. But now we're starting to understand babies have strong memories, our bodies have memories. So that's one thing that's a very big shift in the focus, and there's a lot of funding kind of going into it. And going hand in hand with that and coming back to almost this like nature perspective is that the push for home visiting. So a lot of times when you think of therapy, you go to a therapy office. That's not always possible for people. But it's actually a luxury in a lot of situations, and it's uncomfortable. It's time consuming. It's expensive. For some people, it's even embarrassing. It's a difficult thing to do. So these programs now are able to go right into the homes and see babies and moms in their natural environment, or in the early days when it's very difficult to go out. So home visiting is a little bit more, has more, what can I say? Like, it's just developing now as a really great mode of providing therapy to our youngest and most vulnerable populations. Because, as you know, when a child and their mother are together, one or two missing resources can add up quickly as a problem. So being able to be at home and finding them local resources and seeing the environment creates a much faster treatment success.
That's interesting, because it's almost like we've come full circle. I did visiting nursing a number of years ago when we still went out and we saw the new moms. Unfortunately, we would see teenage moms or young moms that had no support systems, and you're right, they lived in terrible conditions. These babies were often neglected, not because for any major reason, but the mother just didn't have the support, the knowledge, or the wherewithal to take care of that little one. And it sounds like more research is being done or has been done on the fact that they are people. They have a person about them at a very young age, almost from the time that they're born. What kinds of problems do you see that are more prevalent right now?
Right now, there's a great deal of just the financial and housing burdens that interferes a lot with a healthy bond with the baby. So oftentimes a mom is not able to work or get funding, get a good maternity leave. Me personally, I'm actually expecting a baby, and
congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm actually almost 6 months pregnant right now. And even for me, who I can say I'm doing pretty well in my life and I have a stable environment, when I look at the package for maternity leave, it's it's not what I hope it could be in the future. So that's me. People who just work in a job that they get no benefits. Mm-hmm. It is so difficult. So a lot of times they end up having to live with friends or with in unstable housing, in difficult environments, and having to get night jobs, which is so difficult to manage all the energy and all the cheerleading that a baby needs when parents are sleepy. So that's one major, almost like a societal burden that's not even the fault of the baby or the mother. It's just a difficulty. And another issue that I deal with, that just to give people a perspective, that's mental health problems sometimes come with medical problems. So I have a lot of clients that are hard of hearing or deaf. So I'm talking about the babies or the parent. Mm-hmm. So right there, from an early age, there might be a lot of difficulties with tolerating frustration, understanding what the baby needs, even things like weight and eating issues, because you're not understanding necessarily what the baby's trying to communicate, whether they're full or not, or if the baby's anxious. It might be easier to get some comfort from food than it is from mom, who I can't even express myself to clearly right now. So again, environmental issues and then also medical issues that come into play with how are you going to deal with this emotionally.
So it's a multifaceted approach you need to take as a therapist when you evaluate a family with a new baby. If you're called into that situation, what do you do? And as you said, therapy costs can be astronomical. So it's interesting that there's programs there that help you go into the home. I loved being a visiting nurse because I got to see somebody in their own environment, and I got to see how well they followed the hospital instructions, and that was a big eye-opener to me.
Oh.
We only hear a third of what the instruction is upon our leaving the hospital, and when we go home we have to figure out the rest. So when the nurse would come in or yourself as a therapist comes in, I'm sure it's a tremendous benefit to the family to have you go over the instructions so that more of them are put into place.
Right, right. A lot of times, like you're saying, you have received some of the information, but you're kind of drowning in, and maybe you're overwhelmed, or it's so much that you're taking in. So being able, I know even for me, when I left the hospital with my first daughter, I did feel alone and a little out of sorts. And at a time when everyone's looking at you saying, aren't you just so in love and aren't you so impressed? And I'm like, well, yes, but I'm also really tired and confused and trying to figure out how to nurse my baby. And it was a lot. So being able to come into somebody's home and tell them, listen, I know that it's not just all roses and, wonderful smelling babies right now. There's more to the story. So what is going on with you financially? What's going on? How's the house set up? We ask about that. Like, how's your home set up? Is there light in here coming in? Are you getting good ventilation? Is the bathroom safe? Things like that. And then in the holistic approach is asking mom, okay, we assess mom's mental health issues as well. Like, what does she have going on, whether it's current or in the past? Because, like I was saying earlier, because of the family systems perspective, we come in with all these things from the past that affect our parenting, and they're informing us for the good, and sometimes they're informing us in subconscious ways that we don't really know. So being able to talk about it, shed some light on that is so helpful. And then looking at the baby's development as well. So it is very kind of all-inclusive work.
Well, it has to be, because in order to have them thrive and be sustainable in their living situation, you have to look at all the spokes on the wheel, because if one of them is out of sync, it's not going to work. I had a business guru on the other day, and he talks about the 8 pillars of wellness, and if you miss one of them, the rest of them aren't going to function that well. So I can see where what you do is holistic by nature. It has to be. Otherwise, I don't think you would be a very good practitioner, right?
Right.
That's wonderful. Absolutely. Can you give us any example or a case story of someone that you felt really benefited by this approach?
Yes. So one example that I had was of a family who I worked with at home, and she was, lived in an urban setting, and so there was not a lot of room for her to kind of leave the house, not necessarily a lot of things in her community for the mother to contact. So they came in as a result of the pediatrician noticing that the child had some developmental delays when it came to speaking, and even with some like fine motor skills. So almost like how they're using their hands. And then mom also had some learning disabilities from when she was a child. Then she was able to self-identify as having anxiety and depression. When I went to her home, she lived in a room that was almost like you're renting one room in a house. So they were confined to this one space. So given, in our work together, what we were able to discover is, well, given mom's language and almost like a speech impediment, the baby was going to have difficulties to speak. So we were able to actually get her set up with a speech pathologist while also working on speech and language in our play therapy sessions. And play therapy is what the treatment model that we use. So babies communicate through play and understand things through play, sort things out. They're not necessarily kind of sorting out their life by paying the bills and sweeping the floor and then feeding the dog. They're more like, okay, I got to take out my toys and maybe I can make a tower and it keeps falling over, and then I'm asking mom for help, and then it's time to clean up. So going through that, you learn so much, and so many skills can be practiced. So we made so much progress in working with the baby, getting the services that were, sometimes things are beyond my abilities, like, for example, speech pathology. So, as time went on, the baby was improving in her communication. Mom was able to talk a little bit about her anxiety and her management of the situation, but they were still very isolated. So with this client and me seeing this pattern with a lot of my moms that mostly moms and grandparents that I work with, we ended up discovering that, there was this isolation and this lack of time to be able to reflect on your own internal resources. So what I did, considering her situation and what I see overall, was I created a collage therapy group that for self-reflection. And I created it at the local library and invited her and other moms that were on my case and clinicians, other people that I work with. And they were able to come and once a week create a collage on self-reflection with different models for each time they came to the session. So one time about coping skills and internal kind of working models, another day about relationships and how the changes that they've been through as young moms, another day about the past and heritage and traditions and what they're kind of carrying, and another time talking about the future. So through this process, it was beautiful to see how mom was able to come to the library, find resources there that she hadn't tapped into that were so close to her, and also reflect on their motherhood and the changes in that regard. And a lot of these women actually ended up joining other groups as well. So it created a community and a relationship that they didn't have before that. So that's
That's a great story. Again, you're highlighting how there's many strands to the web and how are they interconnected so that we feel a part of something, that we feel supported. We all thrive when we feel supported and our basic needs are met. So I really like that as a great holistic approach and an example in your field. It's beautiful. Massiel, could you give our listeners 3 practical tips that they could use in their everyday life based on your work?
Absolutely. I'd love to. So one thing that I really see as very important is to put development first. So whenever you're going through something in your life that's difficult, but I always try to remind myself in my own meditative perspective is also when things are going well. So when things are going poorly and when things are going well, put development first. Ask yourself, where am I in my stage in my life? And where is the person I'm in relationship with? In my case, I'm talking about babies, right? So where is the baby in this part of their life? Is this typical for this age? What else could be going on that could be affecting the progress of this? Have I been in this type of situation before? Because most of what we're going through is founded in developmental milestones. So you may be, oh, I've been feeling upset. I've been having lack of sleep lately. And it's like, well, yes, if you consider the job situation that you're having, of course it would lead to that. So how could you take care of those aspects of your life so you could be more attentive to your baby when all they want to do is play or something like that? So I always remind people, we don't stop developing when we're 21. You don't start developing when you're 2. You are developing every single day. So always ask yourself kind of, where am I in my development, and put that at the forefront when in doubt. Another advice is something a little bit more practical, is to engage with your babies in vestibular movement and touch activities. So understand that there is so much to learn just from your senses and from your body that doesn't really require much talking. Like, how do you feel? How are you feeling today? So, for example, for a baby that's only 2 months old, well, what kind of game could we play? You could play tummy time. So you put the baby on their stomach. They practice holding their head up. Parent, caregiver, grandma stays close so that the baby doesn't feel alone. An 8-month-old, it might be being bounced safely, or being danced with, or a 3-year-old, you could do a game of like row your boat, where you're kind of rowing each other back and forth by holding hands to the rhythm of the music. A lot of times fathers are naturals at the more physical play, but there is a lot of evidence that shows that when moms do it, babies get very delighted by it too. So jump in there with the physical play. And lastly, just to remember that therapy is not self-indulgent. A lot of times when, in the population that I work with in urban environments, when people have a lot of maybe more physical or social stressors, it might be like, well, I don't have time to be sad about this, or I got to be strong, got to pull myself up by my bootstraps. Remember that life events can create for you to have a need for mental health. So remember, it's not about being self-indulgent. When one person in the family gets therapy, gets some type of counseling, uses some type of coping skills, it trickles into the rest of the family, into your friends unit. So go for it. If you've never tried it before, know that it takes a few tries before you maybe get the right fit. But everybody deserves a little bit of self-care in that way.
Those are beautiful. I think they're very easy to apply. In a holistic model, we work on a wheel. So where am I in this stage of life is always a great question to ask, no matter where we are. And then we forget, even as adults, how important our other senses are. We tend to be very intellectual. We tend to watch videos. We tend to listen to the TV. But getting up and moving is essential to keeping us healthy. And last but not least, if anybody has a problem where they feel they are isolated or alone, therapy is a good a place to go, and we have some great therapists like yourself out there who can help us develop better coping skills. Yes,
and they're willing to work with you at where you're coming from with it. If you find the right match, the person will kind of not push you to something that you're not comfortable with. So I would definitely encourage it at different stages of your life.
Very nice. Well, Massiel, do you have any contact information you'd like to leave us with today before we sign off?
Yes, you can find me on Facebook and Twitter at Massiel Wellness. So that's my first name, Massiel Wellness.
Okay?
That's where you can find the rest of my contact information and things that I'm doing in
All
the
right.
community.
Wonderful. All right, so what I want to say to everyone is I want to thank Massiel for joining us at the Holistic Nature of Us. She gave us an interesting story and process with working with young children, but especially she talked to us today from a holistic perspective, and that's something that I really appreciate. So I want to say this is Judith Dreyer. I'm the author of At the Garden's Gate book and blog, and my book is available through my website, which is www.judithdreyer.com, as well as several distribution arms such as Amazon, Nook, Goodreads, and more. I'd like to remind all of you that a transcript is available for each podcast. Please like and share them. Let's support each other and get the word out. Remember, now is the time for practical action and profound interchange so we can value our world once again. Enjoy your day.